Alrighty, we are back with round 2. I'm playing Affinity again this week, and if you'd like to hear about the changes I made to my deck from last week, you can refer to the round 1 video. Let's go ahead and jump into my opponent's deck. We are up against Bant Flicker. The idea here is that all your creatures have sweet enter the battlefield triggers, and by having each creature enter the battlefield as many times as possible, you can really get a lot of value. In the 1 and 2 drop slot, we have Thraben Inspector and Wall of Omens, both of whom draw cards, making risky hands a lot more keepable, because it can draw you into whatever you don't have, whether that's mana, ways to blink creatures, or more creatures with sweet ETB triggers. They also have Coiling Oracle. When Coiling Oracle enters the battlefield, reveal the top card of your library. If it's a land card, put it onto the battlefield, otherwise put that card into your hand. So either way, it's either helping you with your mana situation, or just replacing itself in your hand. The other card that really helps with your early mana situation is Wall of Roots, a 0/5 defender for 1 and a green. Put a -0/-1 counter on Wall of Roots, add 1 green mana to your mana pool, activate this ability only once each turn. So with these 4 creatures being a big chunk of your early game, you should have an easier time with your mana fixing than with just fetches and shocks alone. Outside of the 1 and 2 drop slot, really everything else just has super powerful ETB triggers, and a lot of them are actually one-ofs, because you don't need more than 1 copy of a card when you're flickering the 1 copy 2 and 3 times. Cards like Blade Splicer, which we've seen in the Eldrazi and Taxes list. We already know how good it is to flicker this thing multiple times. Also, Renegade Rallier. He is a powerhouse in this deck. He's a mouthful, but he reads, when Renegade Rallier enters the battlefield, if a permanent you controlled left the battlefield this turn, i.e. if you've cracked a fetch land or if you've already blinked a creature once, return target permanent with converted mana cost 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. We also have a few creatures with flash, namely Spell Queller and Mystic Snake. Mystic Snake allows you to counter target spell, but Spell Queller actually goes one further. It says exile target spell. It can snag things that are uncounterable. Alright, last couple of big baddies. We have Lavinia of the 10th. Protection from red. When Lavinia of the 10th enters the battlefield, detain each non-land permanent your opponent controls with converted mana cost 4 or less. And detain means, until your next turn, those permanents can't attack or block, and their activated abilities can't be activated. Which, in a format like Modern, basically means your opponent skips their next turn, which is very similar to our last big boy, Stonehorn Dignitary. When it enters the battlefield, target opponent skips his or her next combat phase. So there's lots of ways to kind of time walk your opponent, or at least get one more turn if you're up against the ropes. And last but not least, you have your ways of flickering these cards multiple times. Restoration Angel, which is a creature that does it, and also Eerie Interlude, which reads, exile any number of target creatures you control, return those cards to the battlefield under their owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. And this is the real payoff card. Late game, once you have a wide board, you cast Eerie Interlude when there's like 7 things on the battlefield, and you get so much value for flickering them all that your opponent just can't handle it. Now, as for the sideboard cards that I don't want to see, Kataki War's Wage is number 1 with a bullet. Depending on what I've drawn, it can be even more backbreaking than Stony Silence. Reclamation Sage? That's always good against me, but in this deck where you can flicker your creatures over and over, ETB Destroy Target Artifact is insane. Supreme Verdict is one of the cards that makes blue-white control such a bad matchup, so the fact that it's playable here is pretty uncool. Ceremonious Rejection, we've seen that one before, counter target colorless spell, excellent against me. And Blessed Alliance is good against me too. I guess there's quite a bit here that he would potentially bring in. Alrighty, that was a lot to cover with this deck, but I think that about does it. Let's go ahead and jump into the first game.
Oh, baby.
Alright, I do want to warn you guys that I tried to fix the audio in post. I tried to do something I thought would make it sound better. I also assumed it would be undoable. It turns out neither of those things were true. So, bear with me through this video, as the in-game audio is much less than ideal. Fetch Plains or
Fetch Plains.
Okay.
I took out better card. What did I take out? I did take out Javelineers, which is actually pretty decent.
After editing a lot of my matches, I noticed I keep a lot of hands that are like this, like turn 1, 1 drop, turn 2, 2 drop, and there are matchups where I regret keeping hands like that, but it's not always a bad thing to keep a slow, powerful hand. If I keep a slow hand and it turns out to be against burn, obviously that's not good. But I don't think you should always mulligan just because you can't drop your entire hand turn 1.
What am I looking for in this match? Combat.
Yep.
That's a 1-1, right?
Yep.
Swing for 1.
Ouch.
Go
17.
Well, you didn't want to gain 1 life?
Untap, upkeep, draw, step. Dark Steel Citadel?
Okay. Cranial plating.
Dope.
Okay.
The Ravager. Move to combat?
Okay.
Boop.
Take 1.
So 18 all. Go ahead.
Crack my clue. Ta-da.
To pop a clue cost 2?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Go ahead.
Interesting. I should have been more weary of land pass here. For some reason I thought he just had a bad draw, and I didn't put 2 and 2 together that he might be holding something up. Single best. I also don't know why I floated 2 mana just to play the 1-drop Signal Pest. Oh yeah, there's the Spoke Weller that I should have seen coming. But floating 2 mana for a 1-drop, I feel is pretty indicative that there's something else I want to cast in my hand. And I shouldn't indicate that to my opponent if I can avoid it. Move to combat.
Okay.
Or I guess I could just pay 2 mana for a 1-drop. Jeez, magic is hard sometimes.
I'll block Arcbound Ravager.
For sure. Take 1, I gain 1?
Yeah.
So you go to 17, I go up to 18. Pass turn. With me keeping a slow hand and making the misplays I've made, I have no problem conceding that I'm just lucky my opponent isn't drawing better. Okay.
Go ahead.
Tap. Upkeep. Draw step. Land return.
This is what I need.
Move to combat.
Okay.
1, 2, 3,
Respond
4.
to the trigger.
To this trigger? Sure.
Crack my clue. That'll be 5 damage.
Yep, a 3-2 and a 2-1.
Gonna take 2.
Okay. Gain the 2, 20.
Okay.
Second main phase.
Okay.
1 Sparky Boy. Super best. Go ahead. While this was by no means a fast hand, it was certainly powerful, and I may have regretted keeping it against like a main board Anger of the Gods deck, but I think the risk of keeping it paid off here. Although I can't really take any credit, my opponent did have poor draws. Well, I guess it's on to game 2. To land. Okay, gotcha.
You see my Gauntlet, right?
Yeah. It's like, I'll keep
And
this.
it's one that you bought online.
But you will keep this?
Well, no, I also, like, usually I really trust the Star City, and then, like, I got my Curt Apes. Those FNM foil Curt Apes are super.
Yikes.
They're MP, but
Go ahead.
like they're played.
Since I recorded this game, I have played my Mox Opal before I played my land against a Death Shadow player, and when I go to resolve my Ornithopter, he stubborn denied it. Which I would have been able to pay for if I just made my land drop before I played my Mox Opal. So, lesson learned. Your opponent might have stubborn denial, and you might want your land on the battlefield before you play anything else.
Tap, draw. How do you hate me?
I don't hate you.
Wall of Arms.
Not a okay.
Go ahead.
Tap. Upkeep. Draw step. Apologize for being so slow. 1 blue. Crane. Well, I'm guessing the reason I had to think so long is that playing Glintness Crane when you would like to draw lands typically doesn't feel very good, because most likely you're going to put lands on the bottom of your library, unless you choose a Darksteel Citadel, in which case you're probably choosing that over a more playable artifact. Yeah, and that seems to be the case here, so I have a feeling this was mostly an act of desperation. Oh shit, attacking. I only do that against you. It's so funny.
Give me a clue.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Alright.
Okay.
You know, seeing the cranial plating is interesting. It makes me wonder if choosing the Darksteel Citadel off the Glint Crane was actually an act of desperation or not. It could have just been me trying to secure the fact that I could both play and equip the cranial plating this turn. So that's actually kind of interesting.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's a 6-3 with the trigger. 7, 8.
Take it. They're all flying, right?
Yeah. 19 down to 11.
Okay, good.
Okay. Pass turn.
Rex Sage cranial plating.
Yep.
Go to 10.
Interesting. Your land per turn was the Windswept Heath.
Yeah.
Paid 3 for the Rex Sage. Hold open a Plains. Okay.
If I was holding open a planes, I wouldn't have cracked right there.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I was like,
Go ahead.
interesting. You having a 1-drop white creature makes a lot more sense. Cranial plating.
Okay.
The more I think about it, Crane and the fact that it grabbed a Darksteel Citadel for me is the reason I've been able to both play and equip these cranial platings, and it's the one actually doing all the damage. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that Crane is pretty much winning me this game by himself.
Pass turn.
These are some unfortunate draws. What are my outs here? Crack the clue.
Okay.
Kentucky's.
Oh, off the clue?
Yeah.
Damn.
Alright, Kataki off the clue, let's do this. Kataki is never good. Even though I'm this far ahead, it could still be devastating for me. I can afford to save enough artifacts to win this turn if the card in his hand isn't removal. Like, if that's a path to exile, and I can't win this turn, and then let's say he top decks an Eerie Interlude, blinks his whole board, gets another trigger off the Reclamation Sage, I might not be able to come back from that. So, we'll see how this turn goes.
Pay for itself. So this dies. This dies. I paid for those 3. Draw step.
Okay.
I don't know why I'm drawing this out. Either he's got it or he doesn't, so I should just swing.
That sucks. I hope you don't have a path. Enter attack step.
Yep.
Swing. Man, your poker face is like super good.
Made me sweat every minute of it.
Should've known I was,
Well,
I didn't have
on to game 3.